Welcome to the Andy Noise Experience podcast, Endurance Noise and Random Musings. It's Friday, so let's see where Ed the Jester is. And where are you, Ed?
Right now, I am at the Chicago O'Hare International Airport.
Yeah. Okay, and where did you come from this time around?
I came from my mother's womb, but where I came from today was San Diego. So that's my home airport. And then I'll end up, I have a flight in a couple hours that goes to Atlanta. And then I've got like a 2.5 hour drive from Atlanta to Albany, Georgia.
Yeah, there's in Albany, New York. You know, of course,
Yes.
I lived in Georgia from 73 to like 76 or so. I lived in Marietta, which is kind of a suburb of Atlanta. And so I haven't been back there, but maybe we'll get back there in the future. In fact, speaking of East Coast races, Vol State has opened up registration, but I guess it was by accident. So it's caused a big hoopla because it's sold out, but it wasn't supposed to open yet for next year, you know.
Oh, they already opened it for next year? Wow.
I don't think it was supposed to go live. And so it went live. People signed up. So now it's getting fixed and maybe going live again. So, because I've actually been kind of wanting to do that. Of course, I don't know how I'm going to deal with the humidity, but your humidity tour, you may now actually be able to handle that. So
start to get used to it. Yeah, it's not. I mean, we'll see. I'll be in Georgia with humidity for 30 hours, but I think my body's starting to adapt to it a bit. So not that I like it anymore, but it's easier to bear now.
Yeah, your body, but also it's a mindset, obviously, too, because here in Bakersfield every afternoon it's over 100 and people complain, and I'm just like, doesn't matter to bother me anymore. Interesting, like I have a hike club, and I've been in this hike club on and off since high school, so 40 plus years. And the thing that's interesting is in the hike club, pretty much no one in the hike club is actually from Bakersfield. Or locals, what you'd say. They're mostly people who come to town to work, mainly in the agriculture. I mean, not agriculture, more the oil business. So it's a lot of white collar, college educated people, and they're into hiking. Where Bakersfield's more of a blue collar town, not so much into hiking. Like I'll have people go out to this local Hart Park going, I've never been here my whole life. I'm like, it's 10 miles outside of town. Or you'll talk about, or they'll see me writing about Yosemite or places like, I've never been there. And you're like, it's just up the road. So it's very funny. So I get all these people from out of town and they really hate the heat because they haven't grown up and lived here. And of course, nowadays, everyone stays in the air conditioned all the time. And that's kind of another factor with this whole COVID, like we talked about, that now that everybody's in the house, hiding from the heat, spreading stuff. So you flew in, you're in Chicago, and then what time are you going to be landing then this evening, like late tonight or something?
Yeah, 11:40 p.m. I'll land in Atlanta, and then my race starts 7 a.m. in Albany. So another tight squeeze.
So what happened to the getting some rest before a race? Did you rest this week? Good.
I got some rest. I got 4 hours sleep last night. I'm good to go.
Okay. No, you were talking about that last week that, of course, the night before you don't get a whole lot in, but have you been able to get a little bit more rest this week since you got back?
I have. And the good thing too is that I stopped at 12 hours at my race last week. So my body wasn't as beat up and worn down. So my recovery, I think, was much quicker and easier. So I'm feeling good coming into this race. And then this race is in my wheelhouse. It's 1.1 mile flat paved loop. And most people, well, I didn't say most, but a lot of people will look at that and go, oh, that's terrible. 1 mile loop, pavement, flat. But that's my race. That's
Same
what I
here.
do.
That's what I like too. You can just put it. I always tell people, like with those paved loops, is that you can run.
Yes.
You don't. Like with these trail racing, I just learned how to do this sharing a screen. So I'm actually sharing the Southern Discomfort screen with you.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure.
I saw my video disappear, so I didn't know what happened there. But
okay, you can see me.
Good.
Oh,
I can see you, and I can see your screen.
Yeah.
As long as you can see me, then I'm thinking the podcast will show us both, so that's good.
Oh,
so, I see you've got Southern Discomfort up on the screen share. Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
but yeah, it's funny because people are all like, "Oh, I love the trails and I love running," and I'm like, "Well, I watch a lot of you. You don't do a lot of either when you're on a trail because they're either
Yeah,
difficult or technical. They like being out in nature, but they don't necessarily like to run because if you like to run, you got to be a roadie like me and you. We like to
yep.
run, so give us a road, give us pavement, and we're happy as heck because you can close your eyes and just run." So yeah, it says
And
here the said
I was going to say the great thing about a course like that, like One Mile Loop, you and I know this. It'll take us a couple of times, but eventually we'll find our walk spots.
yeah.
So then I'll probably, I'm thinking maybe a quarter mile of the whole mile, or eighth to a quarter of a mile. I'll walk it, but I'll find spots that in particular either there's a little bit of a grade, or yeah, the surface isn't as nice, and or it's full exposure, something, but something that makes a part of the course not ideal. That'll be my walk part, and not only will it help break up my run, but it also gives me a little bit of a reward. I actually look forward to, I get a little bit of a break with a walk point, but by having that, it also keeps me honest with myself, because when I get to the end of whatever
Yes.
arbitrary portion I make, then it's like, okay, time to run. You got to get running again now. So
Yeah, most definitely. That's and, in fact, I was thinking over the past couple weeks. You had the 2.2 mile course last week, and you had the
yeah,
3 mile course the week before. That
yeah,
yeah, they were difficult courses, but also you just have to figure like when. I mean, they may have built them because of the natural flow of things, but the problem is when you go over a mile, you've got to stretch out, and in a lot of areas once you stretch out, you're going to hit hills, you're going to hit obstacles. So making
right.
these bigger courses just lends itself to becoming more difficult. And me and you, more so me, I've gotten in trouble with race directors. They get mad at me because I complain about the courses. Everyone else is out there bitching too, but nobody actually says anything. And then I'll say something and I get a rep and I'll be like, hey, when we're doing these timed events, we want to go big and we want to go fast. We don't want to be
Yeah,
dancing on trails and stuff. And, and I always tell them, like, you're not going to get the cool kids to come do this race anyways. They think
yeah,
this stuff's for dorks. So no offense. But so you're not going to get the trail boys to come out and run a loop. So let's make it like NASCAR. Just make it big loops and, left-hand turns or whatever. So this one, it says it's at a park, and yeah, it's Southern Discomfort. And they're going to be, it's like a 1.1 mile loop. It said it was actually been certified. So
yep,
yeah, the good thing with the little over a mile is you do 20 laps, you'll be at 21 miles.
right.
So that's always good. Yeah,
Nice.
it's
That's like
actually
ATY. You get that. You see your mileage, and suddenly you jump 2 miles because you're like at something 0.95, and the next time you're 2 miles over that.
yeah, it's a 1.1074 miles certified course. So yeah, that's always good. And not a lot else here. They're talking about they're doing the social distancing, so it sounds like they're going to have little staggered starts and minimal aid. Want you to bring your aid. They're going to give each runner a bag of ice, and so I was just kind of looking over
That'll
those
be
things.
that'll be interesting. Last week's race was, they said, non-aided, and I think they did that just to
Yeah,
comply and make everybody happy. But they actually provided some good aid, which is good, because I got running behind and I didn't have time to stop at a store, and I thought I'm just going to have to beg, borrow, and steal from every other runner there. Which, that's the great thing about the ultra community. They would gladly, hey, oh, you're from out of state, oh dude, yeah, here, whatever what's mine
yeah.
is yours, you have at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't too worried. I don't want to be a moocher, but I would do the same thing if I was at my local home. Like Nanny Goat is kind of my home 24-hour race, because it's less than an hour from me. If I had a lot of extra stuff because I had a car full of stuff and someone flew in, I'd be like, hey, here's my table. Take what you want. Just don't take the last one. If only one's
Yeah.
left, don't take the last one. But other than that, yeah, have what you want.
um, yeah. Speaking of ice, what was interesting when I did the race for the ages there in Tennessee, and it was super hot and humid. Laz again comes up with all these great ideas. They actually brought out, and they had an ice truck right on the course, and you could buy bags of ice.
Wow,
which
nice.
you like it was like honor system, but they had a refrigerated truck, and you'd buy the 5 pound or 10 pound bag ice, and they just kept that thing going through the whole entire race. So
The-
that way, because the nearest town was quite a ways away, and what I would do is I would actually buy the bag ice and didn't mind carrying it around for the entire loop. I would hug the bag ice to
Oh,
try and get
wow.
my core temperature down,
Yeah,
and
interesting. And
yeah,
you're talking about like a 5 pound or 10 pound bag of ice
like
that
you'd
you're
buy
lugging
at a mini.
around?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like you buy at a
like
mini
like a
mart.
10 pound, like a 10 pound bag of ice. Wow, that's some extra weight there for a bit, but hey, if it works for you,
Well,
the
a lot of
race.
times I'd have to buy it because I had to do a loop to get back to my car, and it's a one
Oh
mile
yeah.
loop. But I didn't mind because it was just so bloody hot that it wasn't
What
too bad.
what I saw at the race, Honey Badger, the one I did in Kansas. What's it been now? 3 weeks ago, I guess, when I started this whole 100-mile thing I just recently started. But they actually had a U-Haul full of ice, and they would go out every, I don't know, I think 2 or 3 different places in the 100 miles, so maybe every 25, 30 miles or whatever. And they'd park it there, and then as the crew vehicles came up, they just give them ice free.
Yeah.
I at the end, I was looking at how many people were in the race. Only 29 people in the race, and we initially had to come in with, I think they wanted us to have 12 gallons of water and 30 pounds of ice. And having come from Badwater, I thought, 30 pounds of ice, I'm not gonna need that. It's just Tommy, my crew guy, and myself, not a
Mhm.
whole team of people. But with that hot humidity, we went through it pretty darn quick. But that was really nice to have that. But at the end, I was talking to the race director, and I said, "How did you make any money at this? You only had 29 people showed up, and you kept it small on purpose. You gave us all tons of ice for free." She's like, "No, this wasn't a moneymaker for us at all. This is just a labor of love because we love you guys and wanted to do what we could to make it easy for you." So that was really cool.
Yeah, most definitely. That's one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast, that for the most part, endurance athletes and endurance people putting on races and whatnot, no one's really making any money. No one's getting anywhere. There is a few exceptions, and like in anything, who are very successful. And sometimes you're just like, wow, how did that happen for them? But yeah, it's definitely the case. So I was looking at, we're kind of been messing around with this, was sharing the screen there for a minute, and it still looks like in the 30 hour, didn't really add any new people. So there's like the group about 30 people in your 30-hour race. So we shall see how that goes, and
I,
everything's
I was
moving.
looking.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
was looking at the people signed up. Only one of them I recognized, Jamila, and she's
Yeah.
a strong runner. So I didn't see any, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but I didn't see male competition for me so much. And there could be someone. I mean, there can always be someone that shows up and has never done a single ultra and just takes off, and so you never know. Or someone's maybe you know taken a long time off and gotten some really good training in, and they're ready to blossom. But it looks like, looking at the entrance list, that it should be Jamila and I should be top male and female, and I'm hoping for for sure 100. But I that's 18-minute mile pace. I could walk that and take some naps and still get 100 in there. So with 30 hours, but I'm shooting for 120. I'd like to see 120 or more. I never like to give myself a high end limit, but 120 or more. But again, I'll take 100 at this point, even if I'm the very last one that comes in the 100. The whole point is to get that 100. So
Yeah, I didn't. Let's see here. I'll flip back onto the. It's interesting. Sometimes these ultra sign up, they have results, but like the main results, you'll look at it and it'll, like on the main page, and it'll show, um, one of the races, like it shows what happened, I guess, in the 24. So
yeah,
the records, there's only been 3 people in the 24 men get 100, and actually there's 4 or 5. Actually, more women have done better getting 100 over 100 miles, and I assume that is the 24. So it's kind of weird. Well, here I can look on it here. Let's go this way. It's always kind of weird to try and figure out. So yeah, in the 30-hour last year, just 2 people, Sarah, who's in the race this year, and then Keith got 100 miles. and they just.
So no one's gone over 100 on that course. Then you're saying that's the course record is 100 miles.
I
I
mean,
should know this.
that's just last year.
Okay.
It's kind of funky in terms of trying to figure out. And in the 24, 3 people did 100. So it looks like last year no one went beyond. No, one guy went 103. So he got the. So it's kind of, I guess it. Oh, maybe that's how this thing. I should know how the site works better. It looks like maybe the course record in the 30 hour is just 100 miles, possibly, because this is only the third year of it. Okay, there's a guy 102. So 102 is the record, I guess.
All right. Well, that you never know till you get there and see how things play out. But all things being considered, flat, smooth course, 1 mile loop, even with heat, I'm okay with heat and getting better humidity. So I'm looking to maybe have another course record. I'd love to add one of those to my belt. It's been a while since I've set a course record. So, but it's easy to talk about this stuff sitting down here. Tomorrow when the race is going on. There's so many, there's so many variables, so many factors that come into play, so many things that can happen that, it's hard to not a prediction, but make this call or this goal when, it could sound very arrogant if I finish the race and don't do well. It's like, well, what happened? I thought you were going to go out and do big stuff, 120. So, and I saw just for a second, flashed on your screen, the I Run Far interview that they did with me.
Yes.
And,
I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
That was going to be like another thing. Yes.
But that's it's what I do. It's funny. I said something and a couple people have referred to it as, wow, I like that, the quote. And I said, 80 to 90%, I only make, I don't even remember what I said, but basically I set big goals and probably 80 to 90% of the time, I never even get there, but that's okay. I'd rather set a big goal and shoot for it and not quite get there than set a mediocre goal that's easy to get to. Then I don't want to say what's the point, but it's like I'm here to do what I can to push my body and to challenge myself. I don't want something easy. In fact, I would be nice if there was some competition there, like Jamila and I, if we start, having a little bit of competition there, because we'll push each other. It's too easy to get lazy if there's no competition, to just phone it in and say, all right, 100 miles, 104 will give me a course record, and then I'll just take it easy. I mean, I could do that, and who knows what I'll feel like tomorrow, but I'd like to see if I could push a bit beyond that.
Yeah, so it was interesting, the article on I Run Far, and I'll try to remember to put a link in this podcast and also a link to the race. And it was interesting. I kind of perused it the other day, and what I do a lot of times on my own podcast by myself is I sometimes read articles and go through articles and kind of like almost do like an audible book version, but with my commentary and and so like I started doing that with like just race reports that other people write, and I always make sure I credit people who wrote them. And then of course Lass has had some great wisdom about racing and things like that, so I'll kind of go that, because I know a lot of people they have good intentions to sit down and read articles and stuff, but a lot of people are a lot better off like listening to audible books or listening to podcasts like we are doing. In fact, yesterday I did a one with Ray from Southern California, Ray Berlanga. He was, done the endurance challenge and beyond limits. Had a fun, good one. And he was telling me how he's been listening to the podcast because he's a maintenance guy and he drives from location to location. And so, a lot of people are in their cars. So anyways, I kind of did a deep dive on your your I Run Far article. And so I wanted to kind of like go over some stuff, because we talk about all kinds of stuff here on the podcast. And it was very interesting. I knew you took a quite a long break. And then even though I knew it, seeing it on paper made more sense that basically when you came back, you went for the marathon record right off the bat, right? Pretty much.
I had gone for the marathon record back in 2011, but when I came back after my long break, I went for the 100-mile, most 100-mile races in a year record. Yeah.
No, the marathon record. You did the marathon record first.
Both marathons in a year? Yeah, I didn't really take a, take it back. Actually, I did. I had a tibia stress fracture. So, but it's been 10 years ago because that was 10/11 to 2011, or 2010 to 2011 when I set that record. I started in July of 2010, went to July of 2011. So yeah, I started it 10
Well, no,
years
like
ago, but
what I meant was they said in the article that you ran in high school and then you came back in
oh,
46 and then you had the audacious
oh,
goal. You had the audacious goal of going for most marathons in a year. And then,
I got you. I
yeah,
got you.
and that's what
Yes.
so you just went from doing nothing to going for the world record in the
Well,
marathons
you,
in a year.
you know how that happened. I came back after 28 years between running across the finish line marathon. I have to say running across because I did
Yeah,
in 2000. I walked with two of my kids that were 8 and 9 at the time, which are now 28 and 29. But we did the whole marathon,
yeah.
and it took us 8 hours and 40 minutes. So I did walk a marathon, but other than that one marathon, from age of 18 to 46, I didn't run any marathons. So yeah, 46, and so I did like 3 marathons within the 2-month period of time. And the third marathon I was at was this teeny little loop thing around a park, 2-mile loop. Charlie L. Wine Racing. This is his very first race he put on, by the way. He's now put on over 1,000,
Yeah.
I think, over 1,500 races. But there were some people there. One of them that was there was a guy who had done the Badwater, and I saw the sticker on the back of his car, and eventually found him and talked to him because there's a loop. So you either you're catching up to somebody or they're catching up to you. And then I also saw this tall, thin, super fast power walking African American woman. It's like, wow, she's walking like really fast. Well, of course, that was
Yeah.
Yolanda, and she told me she was going for the record for most marathons in a year. She's going to be doing that starting, I guess, the end of that year. And she's going to go for 106. So that kind of planted the seed in my head. And after she did that, her and Larry Macon both did 106. So I went out the next year and decided to see what I could do. And I'm playing with the numbers. And again, having met Steve Till at that very same race and talked to him about Badwater, I ended up starting in July of 2010 and going to July of 2011. And my
Yeah.
very last race of the 135 was Badwater. And just to clarify, because some people think, oh, well, you counted Badwater, that's the length of 5 marathons, 135 miles. That's kind of not really fair. Well, no, it was one, because it was a marathon or longer race.
Yeah.
So Badwater, even though it's the equivalent of 5 marathons, it was one of the 135 that I did. But yeah, you're right. I kind of jumped in big as soon as I talked to Yolanda, and she planted that seed in my head. And that same race, talked to Steve Till. He planted the seed in my head about Badwater. And then that kind of, from that point, I jumped in with all 4 for that marathon record. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because you kind of came in around the same time because I got to meet Yolanda because what was happening for her to get all the races in is most marathons are on Sundays, and so she would do trail 50Ks on Saturday, and that's where I ran into her or really walked into her. She was doing a lot of the trail Southern California stuff, and we just kind of ran into each other, and I kind of walked mainly, but I would run some. And so me and her are always in the back and then catching people in the front. And that's kind of how I became first aware of Yolanda. And then, of course, her first 100-miler was actually the endurance challenge the same year I did it, way back 2011. I don't even know the dates.
Yes, I remember that. In fact, as I've done since I got back into running, I always stay until the last one comes in. So I had done, I think I came in 22 hours, maybe. I don't remember the exact time, but so I stayed. And Yolanda, and this was because, I actually was co-race director in 2015 for that race. But the original race director, Darren Van Soy, he was really strict on that 30-hour cutoff. I think we talked about this previously, that on a small race, really, I mean, I understand Western states, I understand say having 100 where there's over 1,000 runners, you got to have a specific, 30 hours exactly. But a little race with 20 or 30 people, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. I'm not that every 100-mile means something when you're doing it, but in the whole scheme of things, it's just a teeny little podunk race. You know, if someone's really close, let them have it. That's my opinion. But, you know, I wasn't the race director. So Yolanda was coming in, and she was actually running a bit behind. And it's one, I think, twice in all the races I've done with Yolanda. I've done a lot of them with her. I actually saw Yolanda run. It was just at the very last stretch because she was like really tight on that 30-hour cutoff.
Yeah.
And she actually did break into a bit of a jog. It's like,
Oh,
was like, whoa, Yolanda actually can run.
Yeah. Oh, well, obviously she could. But yeah, because I remember that because that year was my first 100, and I ended up doing around 27:30. You know, being a small race, I actually was like 7th overall. And it was funny. The way I got into the 100 was I was really big that, and I wanted to do a 50-mile race, and all the trail, I didn't really even recognize these fixed races. You know, I had a friend, Leo Marquez, back in the 80s, was doing 24-hour races and doing 140 miles on tracks. You know, all of his friends were, so he was doing them back in the 80s. So what happened was I told myself, well, Western States has a rule that you have to do 50 miles in 11 hours to even sign up for the race.
Back then, now it's up a little bit to 100K, but yeah.
And so I said to myself, I go, you know what? I'm not going to even bother trying to do a 100-mile race if I can't at least do a 50 and 11. And so, you know, I did some like Leona Divide and some stuff, and it was taking me, you know, 12 and a half hours. And I was like, well, I don't really want to be out there for God knows how long. And then what happened was I used to get this thing the kids probably don't know about, magazines.
Yeah.
And it was Ultra Runner magazine, and there was a little like business card size ad for the endurance challenge. And I looked at it and I was like, and I told myself I'm not going to run 100, but this thing's like $100 and I have to raise $100.
That's right.
It's in LA. We raise money for the 100 Mile Club, which is a great organization. It's in LA. It's on pavement. I'm thinking it's in October. I'm in pretty good shape. What the heck? I've been wanting to do this. And then at that time, my Bakersfield Distance Project, which I had a group of athletes, 20 to 30 athletes coaching full-time here in Bakersfield, meeting Tuesday, Thursdays, weekends. They were really gung-ho. So they all came out and supported me, and I signed up for that race. And, you know, that was
Did they crew you? That's what you crewed you? Oh, how cool.
Yeah, because, you know, I had to have, you have to have a crew.
Yeah.
And fortunately I had like a half a dozen of them, and it was close by. And I did the race in a pair of Asics road shoes that I bought from Big Five. I used to wear all the time. I used to buy them for $50, and I stupidly wore like cotton socks. And I mean, I just destroyed my legs, and especially like about mile 60 or 70. I mean, I'm at 250 pounds. I was just so destroyed and beat up. But anyways, long story. But yeah, Yolanda. I remember Yolanda just making it in. I remember her saying how she had to run in, so she kind of got her 100 start with me, and then she picked up a bunch of stuff. So yeah, so like I said, I kind of want to just cruise through this article. I'm not sure how. Hopefully, when I went on the page, I got it on here on another page, and so it talks about. It was talking about your PR, and it says, couldn't you still PR in your thing? And what I thought was really funny was you kept saying a couple times, like, yeah, I might be able to PR in the 100 and in the marathon if I actually trained and I actually got a coach.
Yeah.
and actually, though, the key word, though, is I laughed, was it said, if I paid a coach. And I was like, yep, that's what I should have done. I should have made Ed pay me. And then he might a lot of money. And then he might listen to me, because we have over the years talked and discussed about it. But the thing is, you do what you do and you get by. You could obviously maximize your potential and record setting if you weren't doing what you're doing, but then that's kind of like not your point. And then of course, like Courtney DeWalters right now doing a 500-mile FKT on the Colorado Trail. She's about 3 or 4 days in, and she often talks about her training. I've sat down and talked to her too, and she pretty much just goes out and does what she feels like that day and doesn't really have any formal training. And I think you can get away with that more in ultras, but obviously, like if you ever want to break this 3:01:18 marathon PR, you're going to have to actually do some real training and do some tapering. So I don't know.
Yeah, because that's a sub 7-minute overall pace for 26.2. So yeah, that would take some speed work and some training and
6:52 pace.
Focus. Okay, so there you go.
But I've often told you that one of the things that would really help you with your ultra career is to do some more focused training, maybe once or twice a week, just because you kind of get into a habit. And I remember I haven't seen you run lately, just unfortunately because of COVID, but you used to run pretty good. And then of course, obviously doing all those 40 hundreds, your form started getting really bad. And you used to do that, like that little animation.
My Jester shuffle.
Yeah, but you would do all this upper body, and I'd be like, Ed, it's
Wasting
physics.
energy.
You want to go this way, and you were doing all these quirky little things, and so like when you do, like jump in and do, or like for you, but your schedule's so crazy. Like I do 5Ks and 10Ks still, and that gets the wheels spinning. Of course, I can't push myself, and then of course sometimes doing those 5Ks helps me. Like when I was at the BB 48, and with an hour to go, I thought I had a 2-mile lead on this guy, and I only had a mile lead, and he chased me for the entire last hour, and I ended up running one of the fastest 5Ks of the year, and I ended up beating him by 60 yards.
Wow.
But part of it is because I spent the whole summer doing my summer series. We have a series of 5Ks, and speaking of that race, they're not Adam and Eliza, they've got their Northeastern trail runs, and they're completely shut down. They haven't been trying to do races or do virtual races. Because the BB Farm 48 will be coming out in late September, October. In fact,
and that's for sure definitely not a go.
Yeah, I talked to him like a month ago, and he's like, "No, I'm not."
A good race
He's not gonna. Oh yeah, I mean, when that ever gets back up, you definitely need to return. And I think I will probably go back and return. Pretty good course. It's a little hilly, but great surface, good conditions. In fact, I talked to him, and I'm gonna talk to him on Sunday for a podcast. So yeah, I just kind of was chuckling when I saw you're like, for records and stuff. But I definitely highly recommend people check it out. The article, they ended up not using my photo.
Oh, the one you submitted?
Yeah, they use a lot of the pack sit photos, which are really good. So it's kind of funny. All the photos in the thing, I don't know if you checked that, you probably have, they're all you running on trails, which is like something you never do.
I know that was what surprised me. Is like they didn't have a single picture of me doing a fixed time event or even and there's some really, really nice quality pictures of me doing like Desert Solstice, on that 400-meter track. And so, I was kind of surprised that they were all trails, and it's like, okay, that's what they use, but that's what most of the people who read that their articles are trail runners. So I guess that
and that's what I told you. I've said to you before, like when we kind of get upset with our fixed races, and they always want to make them either like a perfect distance, even though we have spreadsheets, or they want to incorporate some trail or some fun into races. We're like, no, we don't want. Now I'm not like you. You won't see me. I'm not doing any more 400-meter track races. For me, they're just too mentally, they're really difficult, but also just you can't hang out on those things. You can't just enjoy yourself.
You can't be there to socialize. You got to be there it's racing.
The thing is, as a walker, socializing can be a big part of my race, because when you're walking, you can talk. You can't if you've ever noticed, even like Yolanda, you can't really walk and get your heart rate up really high. It's just what it is I often say running taxes your aerobic system and stuff like that. Fast walking is all about technique and size. And so unless you're going uphill, it's pretty dang hard to walk fast and get your heart rate up to like 80-90%. It's very difficult. I mean, I know Yolanda now is training and being a race walker, and she's had a lot of success. She's actually been winning titles, and maybe then she's getting it. But for me, it's just always the technique. I can go outside and just bury myself and look at my heart rate and go, 110. And so it's kind of a strategy. So, but yeah, I like the article, and it said weekly running volume. I guess it does say weekly running volume, not training, because your training is kind of hit and miss. Glad to hear no strength training, because it's like,
I know. I don't know if she pronounced her name Lisa, or I believe it's Liza, because Liza. Really nice young lady, and it's a fun interview. But she asked, okay, so strength training, nope. Stretching, nope. Foam roller, nope. I don't do any of those things.
all that stuff. I mean, I sound old school, but you know what? It's just, most people are not spending enough time actually running. And I always tell people I have a degree in economics, and the way I use my degree, I have a degree in economics and a degree in biology. Well, if your coach is like, hey, I got a physiology degree, so what? It doesn't take very long to learn what you need to know about running physiology, heart, lungs, and a lot of it's just genetic, and there's not a lot you can do. And so once you kind of know the basics, but I often say I use my economics degree a lot more as a coach than I use my biology degree, because biology is biology. Air goes in, air comes out, blood goes around. You don't have enough oxygen in your legs, then you slow down. Lactic acid if you go too fast, glycogen, couple hours, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. But I said with economics, the economics is the study of scarcity. And we all have a scarcity of time, energy, money, everything. And so if you're training to run a marathon, you've got a scarcity of time and energy. You need to be running, not stretching and using strength training and all this malarkey. Just time on your feet. And then of course if you're doing ultras, it's super important. And you see people all the time just doing ridiculous training. They're signing up for an ultra or Badwater, like they sign up for Badwater, and they're in every one of their Instagram posts, they're running in the mountains on dirt trails. Is there any dirt in Badwater?
Sure, off the road.
Yeah.
If you're gonna take a pee.
Yeah,
but no,
it's 135 miles of pavement. So why would you spend all of your time? And also the thing about it with Badwater is they're running trails where you've got to vary your pace. And the one thing like Badwater, it's just sheer monotony. You just are doing the same pace for hours and hours and hours, either going uphill, flat, or downhill.
It's funny. I've experienced this where friends that are from Utah and Arizona, maybe this is Arizona, but Utah and Colorado, that are good trail runners. If I go out to one of their races, they'll just kick my butt. That's just not my wheelhouse. I'll do them, but they come to Badwater. Now you're talking my race. That's in my backyard, and it's funny because I train on road. That's what I train on. They train on trail. But yet they don't adapt their training to fit for Badwater. And plus, Badwater's not 100 miles. It's 135 miles. And if you're used to running 100-mile races and you pace yourself a 100-mile race, that's only 2/3 of the race. You still have, a whole lot more race to go through. And it's interesting that they will just beat their feet up so bad because they're not used to the hard pounding on that hard surface. I'm used to it. I don't get blisters at Badwater. I never do. 9 times I've done it. And it's a good race for me, but because I don't have to adapt my training, I just do my street running. Now, when I go and do a trail race, I don't do well. And the reason is I don't adapt my training. If I want to do better at trail races, I need to go train on trails, train at elevation, do a lot more up and down. And I just don't want to have to drive an hour to go run an hour, drive an hour back. That could be 3 hours of road work next to my house. So,
and that's what I tell people all the time is a lot of times, like with this cross training, it's like, if you have a home gym, which a lot of people now are doing with COVID, like I've built up my gym, but when you're like, say you're going to go and do a class, you spend 30 minutes driving there, goofing around, getting ready for it. The class isn't really an hour, it's 50 minutes. And then, so you blow 2 hours, and that 2 hours, especially if you're training for an ultra, would be better just going for a walk and walk your dog because at least it's time on your feet. One of the things I've seen, and there's research showing this too, is they've done studies with pressure plates and people who run on pavement versus people who train on pavement versus roads. And what happens is when you train on pavement roads, when you train on trails versus roads, when you run on hard surfaces, you actually land softer. It's a survival technique. And so you actually are lighter on your feet. So me and you are actually lighter on our feet. When you run soft surfaces all the time in trails, you hit the ground harder. And everybody says, oh, well, trails are easy on your legs. And that's not really the case because the human body is amazing, as you know. And the human body goes, oh, Ed's out on the nice soft dirt. We don't have to work so hard at landing softly. We get and also the uneven surfaces are bad on your joints too. Like when I have injuries, but when my knee or something's hurting, I head to my bike path because that flat surface is consistent. I don't want to go on a trail because that just jacks up injuries. So yeah.
Yeah. And, when you're doing road running, your economy of motion, you're barely lifting your feet like,
Yeah.
a quarter of an inch. And the problem that I'll have is when I've been doing a
Mm-hmm.
ton of road running, I go on a
Yes.
trail, I'll trip. I keep tripping up because I'm not lifting my feet. I have to keep reminding myself, lift your feet. Well, the more you lift your feet, then the harder it's going to come down. If you're lifting your feet up like this
Yep.
much versus this much,
It's physics.
automatically,
Yeah.
it's physics. And so
Yeah.
that economy of motion that you get used to in road running doesn't lend itself well to trail running, but also, again, if they're used to that lifting their feet and they go down onto street service, they're just pounding, and that's really hard on all parts of their body. And
Well,
you look at some of the really accomplished trail runners. I don't want to say names because I don't want to be disrespectful, but that have just ruined their bodies basically.
mhm.
And I look at it as, I think that's why I've probably been able to use so many hundreds, and
Yep.
hopefully by the end of the year I'll finish with 200, and basically in a 10-year period of time, which is a lot of hundreds, but it's not the same, the hundreds that I do versus 20 in a year hard
Mhm.
100-mile trail races where you got tons of elevation, tons of downhill running. That is so hard
Yep.
on the body, that downhill pounding. So
Well, I tell people all the time that trail running is that with trail running, it gets you ready and in shape to be a trail runner. If you run on the roads, what will happen is you may not be so good on the trails, but if you're on the roads, you get in great aerobic shape where you can take on anything. So you can go to a track race, a road race, or a trail race, and you've got this huge aerobic engine. Now, you may not have the fine tuning to negotiate down the trails as well, but when you like me, people were amazed when I first started doing like 50-mile trail races and stuff. Later stages of races, I'm catching people going up these big ass hills, and I live in Bakersfield, and there's not a hill around for 10 miles. I had to drive 10 miles to get one. So I'm not sure if I lost you, Ed.
uh,
Oh, I just lost your picture. Yeah.
yeah, a call started to come in. So
Yeah.
take care of it. We're good.
So I always say that, like, if you're a road runner, and I've used you, and I've had this discussion with people, I'm like going, you train on the roads, you can handle anything. You train on the trails, yeah, you can do the trails, and if that's your thing, more power to you. In fact, it's kind of funny. I often, and it's still this to this day, I was a skateboarder for 30, 40 years and was skating up until about 10 years ago, where now I just don't want to get hurt. And it was interesting with skateboarding in the 80s with Tony Hawk and everybody. Pool riding and skating parks was the thing, and in all the magazines, that's all it was covered. And if you did anything else like freestyle or slalom or downhill, you were a complete dork. And the same thing kind of happens with ultra running. Trails are cool, and everything else is like, whatever. And I was saying, like, we have to support and respect fixed races and road races and stuff like that, because it's part of the sport. And also with our culture and stuff, more and more trail races are getting canceled because of, people don't want you using the private land, the public lands. And so, more and more races are going on the private things or fixed races. And I said, what happened with skateboarding was when all the skateboard parks closed and pools were hard to find, skateboarding died, because skateboarding put all its money into skateboard parks and vert riding and all the cool kid. And then when the insurance companies closed all the parks and the sport kind of died. And I see similar thing happening with Ultra World, is we invest so much time and money of coverage on the trail part. And then the other problem with the trail part too, is you just got all these races where, how many people want to do Western States? 3,000 people qualify for the lottery and 300 people get in, not even 300. And so you have a sport where people get excited and want to do it, but then they look at the logistics and go, well, I can't ever get into Western. I can't get into Hard Rock. I can't get into all the iconic races. Even Angel's Crest has a lottery, San Diego 100. And so then people go, and they just walk away from the sport. Whereas if they got into like what you're going to do this weekend, Southern Discomfort, doing 24-hour races and stuff like that, they learn and come and find out these are really fun. And I have lots of people go, wow, this is fun. So kind of a sidetrack. I'm going back to the I Run Far article. I noticed it says you sleep, like kind of like me, 4 or 5 hours a night most nights. Yeah.
It depends. Just where my body wants.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will sleep 6 to 8 hours a night, but typically not. But I'm like you. Unless I have something specific, like I had to get up this morning, before 4 in order to get to the airport in time. So I I set 2 alarms because the last thing I want to do is sleep through an alarm. But
Yeah.
most of the time,
Yeah.
my body pretty much wakes up when I needed to wake up, and then
Yeah.
I go out about, get my day going. But
Yeah.
so it was interesting when she'd ask me certain questions, like your sleep. Well, it's a range, 4 hours to 8 hours. Running, well, it's a range in a week, maybe 70 miles. But if I'm doing 100-mile races, it's 100 miles just the race, and then even if I always do at least 2 miles a day. I here at the airport did a 5K. It was really fun. I've got a new thing I'm doing now. I'm going to try and do a 5K in all the airports that I go to if I have time.
Yeah.
And see also how many airports I can sleep in. I've now slept in 2 airports. Not that that's enjoyable, because you see carpeted airports, that is for visual effect. There is no
I know.
cushion, which would be a waste of their money. But you try to sleep on that. I'm almost 58. It's like, I'm too old for this stuff, but it was an experience. But what was my point I was getting? Oh, the range of mileage. It's like there's a big range, because some weeks I'm not really doing all that much, depending on where my body's at. And some weeks I'm doing a lot more. And I could have said even more of a range. It's probably more like 30 miles to 200. But I thought 70 to 120, is probably more realistic as what I do most weeks.
Yeah, well, you're definitely, like, in terms of being an outlier when it comes to training of your volume. And then, of course, something we both have in common that you mentioned, and is another big thing, especially in the trail ultra community, is, the beer drinking and all that stuff. And neither of us drink. And I think that's a huge advantage, because though nowadays we sometimes want to maybe have a drink with everything in the world going on, but it catches up to you. And you yourself just never started, and I never started. And it's kind of funny that we both kind of met one another, like, hey, neither of us have been drinkers our entire life. How weird. And especially in the ultra world.
Yeah, it's funny that my wife and I have never drank. Just we were raised that way, and in a certain religion, and we don't practice that religion anymore, but it's the lifestyle we grew up with. We raised all 4 of our kids. We never had alcohol in the home ever. My kids are all adults now. All 4 of my kids drink alcohol with recreationally. I mean, it's not a problem, but just it's like that they didn't get that from home. That happened from going out, hanging out with their friends, and doing that. But we were at the 6th Day in the Dome, the original one in Alaska, and my daughter came out to help crew me, and we had a little bit of time afterwards. We went and traveled a little bit around Alaska, and she got some special IPA, and I had a sip of it, and it's like, this is just nasty.
Yeah.
And I guess beer is an acquired taste, I suppose. But
yes,
it's like,
it all is.
Yeah, I have no desire. Now, the other part of me is, like, let's say people say, well, Ed, you should try wine. That's different, has different flavor. But here's another fear that I have. I have an addictive personality. My fear is that, what if I start drinking some wine? It's like, oh, I like this. I like how this makes me just relax and feel good. I could see myself becoming an alcoholic if it was something that I really, really enjoyed. So I was like, you know what? I'm not even going down that path. Yeah. I'll just stay away from it. I have no interest in it, and I have no need for it, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. That I always say there's a straight edge is what the version is in punk. Straight edges don't drink, don't smoke, and so I've always been that way, and I've never really seen a need for it. And for me, it all tasted terrible. They're like, oh, you learn to like it. I was like, why do I want to learn to like something that's not good for me? It's poison, and so I'll never get going. But also, I always say that, like, yeah, if I started drinking, I mean, there's a reason why the ultra scene is it has so many people who were, and bless them, former addicts and alcoholics, because they put that obsessive compulsive, addictive personality to it. I mean, like, I basically have gone out every day for 40 years and put in an hour or two. And like, after this, I'll go out and, so it's definitely kind of just an interesting topic, but it is like being in the ultra world, especially. And also, like, it's interesting, you're talking about your kids. It's just being like in American society. It's just like when I was in high school, I was like, okay, I get it. You guys are drinking. College, I get it. And then when we got in our 20s and 30s, they're like, hey, he's going to slow down. And now people who are my peers are still drinking like they did in those. And I'm like, when are you guys going to stop this? I'm like, I thought you guys would grow out of this. It's like, I mean, I have friends who, it's like Monday is Hash House Harriers, which is a drinking group with a running problem. Now
Right.
they describe themselves. And then Tuesday is Taco Tuesday. Then Wednesday, of course, is Hump Day. And then Thursday, there's some reason it's like, hey, the weekend's almost here. And then Friday, of course. And then Saturday and Sunday, they hang out with each other and have parties and barbecues. And I get the whole social aspect, but I've never really understand the whole aspect of we got to be, I mean, people, they use it as social lubricant, obviously, which I've never had an issue with. So I'm really glad I never got started. And I think if I did start it, if me and you both started it, we would be staggering
It would be
drunk.
good. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't have anything. I can hang out with people that are drinking and having a beer at the end of an ultra top. I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
I don't want one, but you can have one. So it's not like it's something that I'm religiously or opposed to in any way. It's just that's not my thing. But you know what? Everybody's got their own way of doing things, and it works for people that I understand at the end of a race, they're like, maybe that's something they look forward to. Oh, I'm going to get my beer. It's just kind of my reward. Like for me, maybe it's going to be a Frappuccino at the end of a race.
Yeah.
That's going to be my little reward. So, it's all good.
I mean, I owned a record store for 20 years and went out all the time. And I was around. In fact, most people in Bakersfield pretty much thought I drank because I was out clubs 4 or 5 nights a week. And I always still laugh at the guys. I go, hey, all that 80s and 90s, I remember it all because I was stone cold sober. You guys were all.
You forgot it all.
I was, and it's interesting you're talking about your kids. My kids, my middle son drank a little bit, but the other two just never had the interest. And they, just now they're like kind of the same as you. Like mine are 27, 28 and 22, 23. So, and then kind of finishing up, I like how, you've really incorporated walking after races. And when you don't feel like running or things aren't feeling right, you do the walking, just getting that time on the feet. And like I always see people all the time, ultra runners especially, I tell them to walk and they're like, well, I'm a runner. I'm like, well, you're not doing a lot of running in a lot of races I see, and you're not, and you can't walk with me later in the races. So how about putting a little of that into your training, and like instead of hitting the weights or the foam rollers or all the other crazy things.
Well,
so.
This whole week, for example, I did not run a single step, but I went out and did something every day, 2 or 3 miles a day. It was just minimal, just to keep my streak going. But I will run this weekend. My legs can run. It's not like they're not capable. I just gave them the break and got the recovery I needed. But I'll probably, with a course like that, I will probably run 3/4 of the first 12 to 18 hours. Mm-hmm. And then probably, here's where it'll probably will break down. I'll go out and run most of it right from the start and do just small. I will have to actually discipline myself to take walk breaks. And I'm going to purposely try to force myself to actually go a bit of a slower pace overall, like an average of a 12-minute pace, which if I can maintain that the whole way, that'd be great. But it doesn't happen that way. You just get slower and slower. But typically I'm going out at a 10 or 11-minute pace and then start slowing down. I'm going to try and early on put some walk in and force myself. Like if I do faster than an 11-minute mile, then I'm going to make myself walk a little bit more to try and force that pace up to more of a 12, 13 and try and maintain that. But then once it gets, if it gets really hot during the day, I will sometimes go hours, just power walk. I won't even run a single step, just power walk. And then people are dying because they're out there trying to run. And it's like, let your pace drop a bit. You'll make up for it when it cools down. Trust me. But the fear, and I understand that, to have experienced it, to have seen that it really can happen. Their fear is, well, if I go slow now, all that time I banked by doing this good pace, I'm gonna lose it all. It's like, no, you're actually gonna give your body a break. And so what happens is at night I start picking it up, and then I start running pretty well because I saved my body. I didn't get heat exhausted, and my legs are not fresh, but they're still good. So anyway, I'm expecting that overall I'll probably run about 50%, I would think, of the whole 30 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I try and tell people that it's like, conditions aren't good, hunker down. But it's like the same thing. You show up at a race, and when conditions aren't good, people don't change their goals. They just feel like, I'm doing this. I'm going to run this time. And I'm like, dude, it's 100 degrees out today or whatever. It's pouring rain. You have to kind of modify. It was interesting when you're talking about, that's not yours, is it?
No, no, I've
It
got
was,
plenty of time.
it was interesting when you're talking about, hunkering down in the heat. I've become a real big fan of Formula One race car racing and watching it. And Formula One is a 2-hour event, and they have to do pit stops, and they have 3 different sets of tires. And so you can be a great driver, but you also have to have tire management, kind of like you. And that, so like the guy who's winning all the time, yeah, he's got reflexes and he's great, but he also, his team will say, hey, 2/3 of the way through this race, we need to get 10 more laps on these tires before they go out. And then you're going to have to do a pit stop. It's going to be 30 seconds, and you win or lose by tire management. Same thing like resource management, basically. And so it's the same concepts. And like people who watch Formula One will be like, well, all these guys are really good drivers. Why does Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champ? And yes, he's a great driver, but he also is doing the tire management, fuel management. In fact, last week's race was amazing. With tire management, his teammates' tires kind of went out on him with a lap or 2 to go. He fell back. Lewis knew this. He was nursing his tires. He had like a 30, 40-second lead, which isn't anything in a race car. On the last lap, the laps take like a minute 20. The Dutch guy, Max Verstappen, was on his tail. His tires actually, with the front left one, like flatted, was falling apart. And they're like on the radio going, he's 25 behind you, 20 seconds behind you, 15, 10. But he nursed that car the last few laps and nursed it, because if he had to do a pit stop, he would not have won. And it's the same basic concepts. I often tell people, and everything, all sports are the same. Like Bill Schultz always says, every race is a mile, breaking it into pieces. And, so the heat of the day. So just kind of interesting, just that, I tell people, you can't go into these things just completely brain dead. And you can have goals, but you need a plan.
Well, that's why I like the fixed time events.
Yeah.
Because there are people that definitely can outrun me.
Yeah.
I'm in my late 50s. I'm not the spring chicken. I still have some decent speed in my legs, but people can just grit it out and outrun me in speed. But when it comes to strategy, and that's why I like the longer, the multi-day, because then it really shows, okay, you're gonna, day one, you're gonna put 20 miles on me, but that's day one. If this is a 6-day race, that 20 miles can disappear easily the very next day. And how do you strategize on your sleep and how you take care of your body and your nutrition? And now let's see how the game plays out as it gets further along. Mm-hmm. So, the race doesn't, in a 100-mile race, it depends on who says it, but the race doesn't really begin until mile 70 or 80 or whatever, because that's when the carnage is in that 60 to 80 miles. There's a lot of carnage that occurs, those who went out too fast, sometimes even before that. But typically by then it catches up, and then they're really struggling. And that's the time that, for me, it's like, it's going fishing. I start reeling them in, little fishy. I'm pulling you in, and that's that's when it gets fun for me. Now it's competitive, mm-hmm. and I don't mind. I try not to pay. I'd like to know where my competition is, but I don't let myself get too bothered if if they're past me and I'm 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th place. Yeah. It's like, what? Plenty of time. Because then once that gets past that bit of a hump, then one at a time, start bringing them in. And that's the fun of it.
I was talking to Ray, and we were talking about races, and I told him, like, the problem with a 24-hour race is I'm not fast, and I don't run enough, and I never do well. I'm never going to do really well. I might get a 5th or a 6th, but there's someone who's always going to get to 100, and I can't get to 100. And I don't like 72-hour races because, one, there's a huge pressure to get to 200, but also the problem is, like in a 24, those guys can run, gut it out, take a break, get back out, and still stay in front of me. The problem with the 72 hours, one, the pressure trying to get to 200, which is really difficult for someone like me or anybody. I've met many people. I mean, we both know Brian Record. I tell this story all the time. I caught him at Across the Years one year, and he was in the 72 trying to get to 200, and it was like 12 hours to go. He's like, yeah, Andy, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I'm like, what's going on? And Brian, was done Badwater. He's like, man, I don't know if I can get to 200. and he has 12 hours. And I said to him, I go, how many miles you got? He's all 24. But that's how hard 72-hour races are.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I've met many people. It's just the idea of going around that damn thing 24 more times. And so but the problem with 72-hour races is guys can go out hard, blow up, take a big break, come back out and start running. And I'm never going to beat them. But the 48 is a sweet spot in that I can basically stay up the entire time. And if I manage it right, they have to lay down, and when they lay down and they get back up, I can build a lead on them, and or they can't get moving. And so, you know, I've done half a dozen 48 hours. A couple of them, like at Jackpot, I've quit early. So I've done like maybe 6. I quit early at Jackpot a few times just because I don't like that course. And then one year I just walked a 48, which was the hardest thing I ever done in my life. I walked the entire way at Blue one year. I told myself I got to 60 or so, feeling pretty good. Those last 30 miles were brutal. I had to stop and I had to take sleeping breaks, kind of like how people who run too hard. And I ended up only I got 100 miles in like 40 hours. And then I went out and did another 6 to move up the rankings. But the long-winded of this is I've also like won a 48 and come in third twice in 2 other 48s with, you know, decent fields in them, you know, 20, 30 people, because it is like strategy, so much more of, you know, take care of yourself, pick your spots. And, you know, I jokingly called you when we were at Across the Years that one year that you're like a great white. You're just out there swimming along, taking your time. You got all the little fish following you around. But then when you smell blood in the water, before you even know the person's hurting, you start going after him, and you hunt. I've seen you hunt down many people in that particular race. It was just hilarious. I was like, he's just a killer sheet. He gets one thing on his mind.
That's right.
And he had a 70-mile lead on you, and you walked him down, and you know he could have easily.
I might be the fun, easigoing Jester, but you know what? I've got the competitive drive in me, and when I see someone that I want to catch, I'll still be nice to you, but you're my competitor, dude. I'm going for it. I'm going for the kill.
Yeah, and like I said, and we've talked about this many times, that both of us use our competition to bring out the best in us. It's not really a personal thing. It's not we want to beat people. We do want to place in front of them, but we want to place in front of them because that's what we should do. We want to get the most out of ourselves. And it was really funny when I first started coaching full time with the Bakersfield Distance Project. My ladies, mainly women, we'd go to races, and in the shorter stuff they'd beat me, but in some races I would beat them, or like I would run by them in the last part of the race, and they'd get upset with me because I'd catch them, and they kind of expected me, like their girlfriends, like you see a lot of women do, run in together. And I catch them at mile 11 of a half marathon. I'm going, or like I would catch them, sit on them, and then as soon as I saw them falter, take off and run away from them, and they would get upset with me. And I go, look, I'm a competitor. I'm like Dad, that like, you're not beating me in that pick. My son's not going to beat me in a basketball game until he can beat me. And so you're my athlete, and I'm coaching, and I love and respect you. But if I have a bib on, it's a race. And I used to tell people, I go, look, if you don't want me to race you, you buy the bib. You know, because I don't want to bandit races. So if you want me to run the whole race with you, you buy the bib. I'll give you the, I'll give you the crap. I don't want the shirt and all that stuff, but I don't want to bandit. But if I'm paying for a bib, I'm racing. And if it could be an 80-year-old woman, like, well, when I went to the BB Farms, one of the reasons I ended up getting third overall in that race, male, and beat that guy by 60 yards, is because Don Winkley was there. And I knew he was going to go to at least 100. And so I was out there killing myself because I had just done some races. But I was out there all day going, I got to beat the 80-year-old. And then there was another guy that was there, Newman or somebody, but really sweethearted guy. But both these guys are in their late 70s and 80s. And so it was like, I came this far. I got to at least stay in front of them. So, unfortunately, Don had come up with, Newton Baker and Newton Baker 75 and Don Winkley, and they were in front of me for like the first 30 hours of the race. And I was like, I can't lose to an 80-year-old.
the benefit of the competition is it's a focal point.
Yeah.
When you're especially multi-day and you're just barely hanging on from delirium and trying not to, and the more of them you do, I think, I remember the first multi-day I did, I was in a fog. It's like my brain had swelled. It's just a fog, and then they get easier and easier and easier, and you get more clear thinking. And I know that coming into a race when someone it's their first multi-day, I know they're going to have to deal with that
Yeah.
mental fog at some point and that clouds your judgment. But with having some competition, now it's a focal point, and you can laser vision on that one task. I'm going to catch that person. I'm going to catch that person, and it might take multi-day. It might take 10 or 12 hours or a whole day to eventually, slowly start to bring them in. But that's that focus is keeping you driven for that end result.
Yeah, most definitely. So I think, let's see, what was the, then I want to go over it. I'm just kind of using this article because it's kind of good. 3 factors add attributes to running performance: the Jester costume, attitude of gratitude, and helping others in their ultra journey. And I definitely feel that case with myself. I enjoy being out there and being with the people and, helping them, but it really is helping me. Definitely. So, and that's kind of the whole point. You said it kind of about volunteerism is you get so much out of it in all kinds of aspects.
And I do love competition, but you know what? There is something that's even more It's enjoyable to help someone get to their end goal and finish a race, especially if they're thinking about dropping out and you can convince them to stay in. That's really rewarding in multiple ways. And it's really fun to win races. But you know, the one thing that's even more fun than winning a race, now I'll ask you to guess. What, knowing me especially, and you've at least one race you saw this happen, but what do you think I feel is even more rewarding than flat out winning a race?
I'm not really, I'm kind of lost right now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
It was the race that you and Adam had gone to, and Adam was trying to get a certain distance, and then he ended up not. Well, remember what happened at that race?
Oh, tying in him. Yeah.
I tied with the, and that to me is
that's what I was going to say.
enjoyable.
That's what I was going to say is tie. Yeah.
Tie for first. And I've had that opportunity 3 or 4 times now, and it's so much more rewarding to be competing with somebody and really pushing, and then get to a point, and this is the way it typically will happen. Eventually they wear down, and then I'm still ready to move, and I'll make my move on them and move strong. And instead of just pushing past them and breaking their spirit, I'll move right up to them and have a little conversation, say, all right, here's how much time we have in the race. We could battle it out, and that's fine. But I think we both know where it's going to go, because I've been catching up to you and I'm feeling pretty strong. Or I'd love to we don't have any competition for a long way behind us. So as long as we keep moving, I still want to get at least to, 100 miles or more, whatever we're at. But I'd love to do this with you and have us finish together as a tie. And so far, everyone that I've been up with them on equal mileage, they've all said, no, I should take that back. I got to really respect him. John Olson, it was the race out in Modesto. It was that first year, and I'd shown up late, like 40 minutes late. You and I, we carpooled together. Mm-hmm. And typical me, I run behind and went and picked you up, and then just didn't plan correctly. So showed up, and I was already right off the bat, 40 minutes behind. So everybody already had at least 2, 3, 4 miles on me, and just slowly started, keeping going. Well, John Olson, at one point he had the American record for 100 mile. I think he was 12, a little over 12 hours. And but he had been going through some issues and just wasn't, his body was still in recovery mode. But eventually he had been in the lead for a while, and then eventually I caught up with him, and I have so much respect for him. And I had said, hey, John, I'd like to finish this race. We can do whatever you want to do, but I'm feeling pretty strong. And he was a walk point at that point. I said, I'd love to just do this together. He said, no. I said, Ed, you've earned this win. He said, I want you to, you go on. A couple of times I said, John, I'd love to, it'd be so cool to be able to finish the tie with you. But he was like, no, none of that. This win is your win. Yeah. You are plenty strong. You do it. And that was I really respect that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I remember that race, and you've lived in Southern California for how long?
30 years, 20, yeah, a long time.
And pretty much you always think you're going to fly out of Southern California and head north,
Yeah.
and you've had magical thinking for sure. But yeah, we rolled into Modesto. It race started at 6, and we got there like at 6:30, 6:35. Had to get you all going. But one of the things that made that race very difficult was it was that evening start, and evening starts
Yep.
are just terrible, and they're really hard on people who don't have experience like you and I in multi-day, because you are up all day and then you run all night, and then the next morning comes and you're usually getting done, and then you have the whole day to just torture yourself. And
And
yeah, it's definitely.
that's the thing about Badwater. I've done 9 Badwaters now. I did 3 with the morning start, which is the way
Yeah.
Badwaters had been done for so long. And then we had the 1 year that we couldn't even do it in Death Valley. And then as a concession to let the race back into the park, they said, well, we can do a night start. That way it won't be quite so hot. We won't race if it's over 110. The only way to do that would be night start. But everyone that I've had this conversation with, who's a veteran of the morning start, and even though the morning start means you will be in the heat of the day going through Death Valley up to, whatever, 120, 130 degrees, you're going to be in it. Whereas the night start, you're going to avoid the heat, supposedly. But there was one year, a couple years ago, with Owens Valley was 128 degrees, and we were right in the thick of that. That was that really weird year where it stormed, and that was my worst year. I had a 44-hour bad weather. Anyway, it's much more difficult to do the night start, even though, okay, it's cooler weather because and the night start is not an evening start, it's a night start, 8 or 9:30 or 11 p.m. So you think, okay, well, I'll take a nap during the day and rest. You're not going to take a nap. No. Your adrenaline's flowing. You're amped. You're like, I want to get out there and race. I want to race. And you just, you can sit there and pretend that you're going to fall asleep, but you're just so antsy. So you're starting out right off the bat. You've been up all day. Then you go that night and then all day. And then, unless you're one of the speedsters, you're going a second night. And if, like me, I try and do Badwater with no or minimal sleeps, where I'll take little 10-minute cat naps. Yeah. And it is so much more difficult doing the 2 nights of no sleep versus starting right from the morning and going straight through one night and finishing up that next afternoon or evening. And
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I was at Santa Barbara 100 and they started at 6 o'clock, and that's brutal. I remember little Natalie Larson.
That's a tough course too.
Little Natalie Larson was out there, and she was just not moving. The only thing that was nice about that race is it was fair. All the cutoffs were 20-minute pace, so you didn't have to get to like 50 at 17 pace, which a lot of them do. And so she was basically just rolling through everyone at 3 miles an hour. But that poor girl was out there from 6 at night on Friday till 6 in the morning Sunday, 36 straight hours, and basically just had to keep moving the whole time because she always had sort of injury issues. And of course Joel was out there too. But I used to think, I want to do a night start, and then when I did my first night start, I was like, I never want to do another night start again if I can, because they're very difficult. Speaking of kind of the tying and races and stuff, I think part of it, like with John Olson, he kind of comes from a background like me, where he obviously, I'm guessing, but he ran in high school and college. And so in those atmospheres, it's kind of drilled into you to go for the win, but also it's against the rules to tie.
Oh,
you can both get disqualified. Like if you're in a cross country race and you run across and grab hands, you can get disqualified. So
I never knew that.
Yeah. So like when you come from like myself or John, and I'm pretty sure John's a high school cross country coach, teacher. I'm sure where you didn't play. So for us, it's more the idea. Now, did you? I didn't really ask, but you didn't do any sports or anything in high school? I've never heard you really talk about it.
Well, I went to a little podunk parochial school, and not to get into religion, but it was basically against their faith to have competition, which is silly because it's very competitive academically. Or if you were in the band, that was competitive. You would compete for first chair. Anyway, but there was something against sporting competition. So we didn't have sports. We had a track and field day, one day. And I started running on my own and fell in love with running. So while I was in high school, I actually trained myself to do a marathon,
Yeah.
and before my graduation, my senior year, I actually did a marathon, and that
Yeah.
was it. No, I had no sports whatsoever in high school at all.
Yeah. So like you like growing up as a kid, you didn't play any sports
No, because I
organized?
grew up as a foster. No, I grew up as a
Yeah.
foster kid, and my parents were going to. I mean, that's money that I wasn't their kid. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, even though I got adopted, and then by that point, my foster dad died. It was just single
Yeah.
mom raising me, so she didn't have money. But no, and again, that mentality of that religion, which is what she
Yeah.
raised me in, sports competition wasn't
Yeah.
healthy. Supposedly, it's one of the healthiest things for a kid, I believe. But
Yeah.
anyway, but so no, I never did any organized sports, any team sports, none of that.
You know, I mean, obviously now organized sports has gone way overboard where you got kids specializing in a sport at 8 years old and it's ridiculous. But I mean, I grew up in apartments and whatnot, but also we just grew up like football. We played touch football, we played basketball, and so I was always playing with the kids in my neighborhood, and then got into like organized sports at a proper age of 7 or 8 and played
Yeah.
baseball and basketball and football. And then of course in high school. So I always had that channel. In fact, I often tell people that one of the things that kind of separates me and probably is with you too is that like a lot of people come into running like later in life, or they come in for running for, you know, to get in shape or this, that, and the other thing. And I say like, well, the thing is you're like, or the lonely distance runner kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, look, I'm a shortstop point guard who got tired of sitting on the bench and I was a young man at 15, 14 years old, and I wanted to compete. The coaches didn't think I was good enough. So after a couple of years of not playing a lot, I played football, basketball, baseball my first 2 years in high school. My sophomore year, I'm sitting on the bench going, I want to play. This sucks. And so I left I walked off the team, walked over to track because I was like, okay, I win the race, I go to the next race. That sounds good to me. And so I went into running purely as a young person who wanted to compete. And it was just a vehicle to compete. It wasn't, and I found out I actually had a natural ability for it and I enjoyed running. But I didn't go into the sport like to lose weight or have fun or hang out with friends. It was like, I want to compete. I'm sitting in the bench, all these team sports. I went to a pretty hoity-toity school. When we moved, my parents would always make sure we moved into the best school district, and often meant, but I didn't live in a house till I was a senior in high school. So I was the apartment kid going to the really nice schools. But the problem when you're playing team sports is you got coaches evaluating who you are. And so when you're going up against the judge's son to play second base, and things are all sort of equal, guess who's sitting on the bench and who's playing? You know, I mean, people are like, oh, yeah, right, Andy, maybe he was just better than you. And I'd be like, well, but so that's like, so I often tell people, so my attitudes and behavior sometimes and gets me in trouble with race directors or fellow competitors, because when I see stuff going on, I get like, hey, this is the rules. And other people, and you know, in ultra running, a lot of people are grumbling, complaining about stuff, but they don't say anything. But it's also because they come from a personality that's slightly different, to shy, quiet, reserved, or, you know, they, you know, blah, 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 where like, I'll just say, hey, you know, this guy's, you know, this is the rule here, or this isn't working, or blah, blah, blah. And then the problem is people take it wrong. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, but in baseball, basketball, football, there's all kinds of trash talking, or, you know, trying to get an advantage, or making sure other people aren't taking advantage of you. And I've talked to you about this before when I'm at some of these races and they don't enforce the rules equally. And then when I bring it up, they're like, hey, you know, we're just out here having a good time. And I'm like, okay, then let's throw the timing chips away. Not like it's a competition. And, you know, even though, you know, Ed's running for the win, but you also need to enforce the rules and whatever on the person in the back, and just makes it fair, and don't change the rules, you know, about like dropping down in races. Or, I mean, you know, as you know, you take advantage of it sometimes, but it's in a way sucks because,
Well,
you know,
at the race I was at last week, I knew I was going to be pushing to get 100 in the
yeah,
24. Just the you know, we talked about this. So I came around. It's probably about hour 9 or 10. I told the race director, I said, so what is your policy of dropping down from the 24 to the 12? He said, policy? I don't have any policy, because we're in the Midwest here. You know, we're in, where was I last weekend?
Kentucky.
And it's like, if you want to drop in the 12-hour, that's fine, perfectly fine with me. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather get, 50 miles in 12 hours on the books than 50 miles in 24 hours.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I still count that in my mind as a DNF.
Yeah.
For example, my last race I won was the 1st of November. And so this is actually the longest I'm hoping I'll win this weekend, but it's been over 9 months since I've won a race. Since the first race I've won 50 races of 100 miles or longer. This is the longest stretch I've gone without a win. And in that time, I've had 3 DNFs. Now, if you look on Ultra signups, you won't see 3 DNFs because you'll see Chimera, which I entered a 100-mile race. I got credit for the 100K, not a DNF. In fact, I took first place male. There's nobody running it really. So, and then your race, Celtic, I was there to run 100 miles in 24 hours. It was really, my adrenal fatigue was really at its peak at that point. And as you know, I dropped into because you guys had a 50. Adam let me drop into the 50. It's like, well, if they're going to let me, I'll take advantage of it. In my mind, though, it's still a DNF because it should have been 100. And then this one just last weekend. So on the books, it doesn't look like there's any DNS since November, but I know there's 3 times. They're all supposed to be 100. One ended up being 100K, one ended up being 50 miles, and there's one last week, 51.6. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I mean, we talked about this last time about, the old school mentality of, rather die than DNF, and we changed. And it's also, we've just changed, obviously, the times have changed, where the participation trophies, and we make fun of it, but, all that kind of thing. And I get, but what I really would like is like, it's never going to happen, but like there'd be more of a race director's like rule book on this kind of stuff, and saying like, and some race directors are starting to do it. And a lot of times it's because people like me and you, me more than you probably, because I actually asked before the race, just because you're usually like, where am I at? What am I doing? So, but like I'll look over the rules, and so they'll say, hey, you can drop down, but we're not going to put you in the results. We're going to put you in the you can't, or we'll put you in the results, but you can't receive the awards, which I think is perfectly fine, because if I'm in the 12-hour and I know you're in the 24, and then all of a sudden you pull out with a 51 and I get a 49. I'm like, hey, what the sorry,
but your competition.
Yeah. Not that I would have beat you anyways, but more just like, hey, I'm more black and white. Like, you sign up for the 24 and you stop with 12 hours to go, you got a 51. And like I said, I've got a 21-mile, 72-hour, and I've got a 60.5 mile 6-day, but I kind of really wish we would get to a point where things would change up like that. And speaking of, it's kind of, I thought of this and then I completely forgot about it when you were looking at like this race you're going to coming up, and how pretty much everyone just got to like 100, 102, mainly because that guy's like, oh, I'm going to do one more lap so I can win this thing. But then I'm only going to do as many laps, and then I'm going to, more theorizing, but probably what's happened. The other things you have to realize is we live in Southern California. And California is huge. A lot of people, Southern California is big, and it's really competitive. Yeah. It's just mind-boggling competitive. And like I live in Bakersfield, which is 2 hours away. And up here, when in high school, I was a big fish in a little pond. I'd go down to LA and get my ass handed to me. I mean, because the competition is so fierce. And like a perfect example is one time I took a group of my runners to the Surf City Marathon. And my ladies were decent little runners, but we're sitting on the bus going over to the start, and there was a group of people from Orange County, and they're all talking about their Boston qualifiers and stuff, how they qualified. And I said to my ladies, I said, see those people over there? They look like you, don't they? Yeah. They're all going to Boston, and you're an hour behind the Boston qualifier. Why are they going to Boston? Because where you live, people go, oh my God, you ran a marathon? That's amazing. Where they live, the first question is, have you run Boston?
Yeah.
And so it's just the peer pressure and the expectation. Like if you run in Orange County, you're like trying to get an Ironman, you're trying to run Boston, and and so it's, competition. And I have up the road 40 miles from me, McFarland. And, they won 9 state titles, and there's a Disney movie on them. Now, the only reason they haven't won more titles is the dumb shit in our area, central section guy. There's 10 sections. it's the sections, they win Division 4s, which is 700 kids. Well, here in all the other regions, they do it by school population, but our guys were like, well, McFarland's winning too much, so they moved into 3. They won Valley, but they didn't do as well in state. Then they moved into Division 2, and now they're in Division 1, running against schools with 3,000 kids. And it's demoralized the program because there's 700 kids at McFarland. But the thing about it was, in McFarland, I used to joke that, like, at Woodward Park, which we've been running on for 40 years, like, you break 17 on there, you're a decent runner. You break 16, you're really good. Well, when, like, a Bakersfield kid, if he runs under 17, we're like, oh my gosh, like I had Bakersfield High, we have 2,000 kids. We had 1 or 2 kids break 17 on the course. McFarland, their top 7 kids are breaking 17. I used to always joke that when they go home, if they don't break 17, they don't get dinner that night. Because their uncles and their dads and their brothers like, hey, what'd you run today? 17:22. Get out of here. Because, and so much.
They all did under 17 when they were that age. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, and what's amazing about McFarland is they'll have 7 guys under 17. The school only has 700 kids. Unfortunately, in our area, 40% of the kids are ineligible. Can't keep a C average. So then you so you whack. So now there's like 400 kids that can play sports. Half of them are girls. And now you're down to 200 boys. And then they have a football team, not very good. So then you're working with like 100 kids and you're getting 7 of them to run under 17. But it's also just the community. Wow. And also they train. They actually, one of the things I loved, I know I've been rambling on here. One of the things I loved about Facebook when I was coaching, I was coaching in 2006, 2007, and the kids were all on it. But what I loved about it, it was like, oh, hey, look at this girl in Fresno. She just went out for a 14-mile run. You guys are on my varsity team. I can't get you to go run 6. and she could almost beat you. So it was great and that's kind of what you're seeing now, like in youth, like track, is you notice like kids are like, there's been more, like for years, there was only 4 or 5 guys broke 4 minutes in the mile. In the past few years, 7 or 8 of them done it because they see it's possible, like you've talked about with Liz doing how many hundreds in a year. They see it's possible, but they also can go online and get good coaching and motivation. So I think that's kind of what it's interesting where you're traveling around and you can just see the different intensity level and all that stuff. So it's good to have that. And so look forward to seeing how you're going to do this weekend. I don't think there's any results up. But hopefully,
I don't know if they'll post them over the weekend, but we'll check back in Monday because Sunday my race isn't until 1. Then I got to get from there 2.5 hours back to So Sunday's pretty much shot, but Monday I've got a big old layover. I come back, fly from Atlanta back to Chicago. I leave Atlanta at 6, 7 in the morning, and I'm going to be here for hours and hours and hours, and then fly out in the afternoon. So we'll connect up Monday. Hopefully I'll be able to say, I got the win. Yeah. I was going to do something. Here was what I was wanting to do. It's like, oh, this has been so fun. I kind of been looking like you almost. Then let my beard go. And I thought, you know what? If I win, I'm going to shave. So that would be the thing that they would, I'll say, if you come on and you see me clean shaven, you already know I won the race. But I couldn't find my razor charger. It's like, I don't know where it is. So I don't even have my razor. So the shave will have to wait. But anyway, that's, if I win when I get back home, this is all coming off.
You had talked about, and since this race, you've got a little bit more of a cushion about maybe getting a hold of me and actually doing a little bit on.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. How about Sunday? Maybe mid-morning because it goes until 1 o'clock. So maybe sometime, let's see, because you're 3 hours earlier, but I know you get up super early anyway. I'll text you, but maybe on 10 o'clock, actually maybe even closer to the end. That might be better. Last, maybe for the last 30 minutes, whatever. If it's not super competitive, if I've got far enough a lead and I'm where I want to be, and I can maybe
that would actually work because I usually get done with whatever I'm doing by around 9 here, which would be noon there. So if you actually maybe can link up and
let's do that
and do something if depending on how you're feeling and how it goes.
Yeah.
So
okay,
that sounds good. And so you've got it's already August 7th. So this is August 8th, and then
what time is it?
Yeah.
7:30. Oh shoot, it's 7:30.
Your
My plane leaves at 7:52. I got to get going.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
And then next week is your birthday week, right?
It is. Yeah.
And do you have something going on that week?
I do. Oregon. I'm going to be at the Angry
Okay.
Owl
Oh, that's right.
24-hour.
I remembered it, and then I remembered, then I forgot it. Okay. Well, let's end this so you can get ready to get on your plane.
Yeah. All right, Andy.
Yeah.
I'll see you Sunday morning.
Yes. Well, hopefully we'll do that. So,
Okay. Sounds good.
talk to you later then. Bye.
Okay. All right. Bye.